The chandeliers of the Hotel Mirabella cast golden light across the marble floors like liquid honey, each crystal fragment refracting the wealth and power gathered beneath its vaulted ceilings. Miami's elite moved through the ballroom in practiced elegance, their laughter carefully measured, their smiles professionally maintained. The annual charity gala was less about charity and more about seeing and being seen, about consolidating alliances and displaying dominance in the most civilized of arenas. Elena Martinez stood near the bar, her champagne untouched, watching the performance unfold with the detached observation of someone who had learned to read rooms long before she understood why it mattered. She wore a midnight blue dress that hugged her slender frame with understated sophistication, the fabric catching light as she moved, revealing and concealing in the same breath. Her dark hair fell in loose waves past her shoulders, framing a face that held both vulnerability and something harder, something earned through years of rebuilding what others had broken. At 24, she had learned that beauty could be both weapon and weakness, depending on who wielded it and who perceived it. Tonight, she preferred to be invisible, to complete her duties as Luca Moretti's executive assistant and disappear before the networking became suffocating. 3 years had passed since Adrian had ended their relationship with the casual cruelty of someone discarding a toy that no longer entertained him. 3 years since he had looked at her with those cold blue eyes and explained, as if teaching a slow child, that she simply wasn't ambitious enough, wasn't connected enough, wasn't enough period for the life he intended to build. He had moved on to someone with a pedigree, someone whose last name opened doors, his charm could not, and Elena had been left to pick up the pieces of a self-worth he had systematically dismantled over 2 years of subtle erosion. But she had picked them up. She had rebuilt herself in silence, without the dramatic declarations or public processing that so many seemed to require. She had taken a position with Moretti Investments, initially as a junior analyst, and had proven herself through competence rather than charm. Luca Moretti had noticed her work ethic, her discretion, her ability to anticipate needs before they were spoken. Within 18 months, she had become indispensable to him, managing not just his legitimate business interests, but occasionally glimpsing the shadows where his real power resided. She knew what he was. Everyone in Miami with any real awareness knew what Luca Moretti was. But he treated her with a respect Adrian never had, valued her mind as much as her appearance, and paid her enough that she had begun rebuilding not just her confidence, but her independence. The crowd shifted near the entrance, a ripple of attention that signaled someone important had arrived. Elena glanced up from her champagne and felt the ground tilt beneath her feet. Adrian Blackwood moved through the gathering with the easy confidence of inherited privilege, his tailored tuxedo perfect, his blonde hair styled with careless precision. He had aged well, she noted with the objectivity of someone no longer invested in his approval. The woman on his arm was exactly what Elena had expected, all refined features and bored elegance, the kind of partner who understood that marriage was a business arrangement with aesthetic requirements. Their eyes met across the ballroom. Elena saw the moment recognition flickered through Adrian's expression, followed immediately by calculation. She had changed since their last encounter, she knew. The softness he had criticized was gone, replaced by a composed strength that came from surviving his rejection and emerging sharper for it. She held his gaze for exactly 3 seconds, long enough to show she was unafraid, short enough to deny him the satisfaction of rattling her, then deliberately turned back to her champagne. She felt him approach before she saw him, that particular displacement of air that came with unwanted attention. Elena. His voice carried the same smooth confidence it always had, as if the past 3 years had been an intermission rather than an ending. I wasn't expecting to see you here. I heard you were working as someone's secretary. The diminishment was intentional, the verbal equivalent of patting her head. Elena took a slow sip of champagne before responding, using the pause to center herself. Executive assistant to Luca Moretti, she corrected, her voice pleasantly neutral. And you're still collecting wives based on their last names, I see. Adrian's smile tightened at the edges. His companion, who had been examining her manicure with studied disinterest, looked up sharply. "This is Vanessa Ashford Blackwood," Adrian said, the hyphenated name doing exactly the work he intended. "We married last year. Vanessa, this is Elena. I'm sorry, what was your surname again?" Before Elena could respond, she felt a presence materialize at her side, solid and commanding in a way that made Adrian's posturing look like a child playing dress-up. Luca Moretti had moved through the crowd with the silence of a predator, and now he stood close enough that Elena could feel the heat radiating from his body, could smell the expensive cologne that couldn't quite mask something darker, something dangerous beneath the civilized surface. "Martinez," Luca said, his voice carrying the faint accent of his Sicilian heritage, smooth as aged whiskey, and just as intoxicating. "Elena Martinez, though I prefer to think of her as indispensable rather than catalogued by family lineage." His hand settled on Elena's waist with casual possession, the touch burning through the thin fabric of her dress. "Luca Moretti. I don't believe we've met, though I recognize you from the financial papers. Blackwood Properties, correct? Your father's company." The emphasis on father's was subtle but devastating. Adrian's face colored slightly as he registered not just the implicit insult, but the much more pressing reality of who was delivering it. Everyone in Miami knew who Luca Moretti was, and what he was. The man who stood before them now looked like he belonged in the ballroom, his tailored black suit perfectly cut to his muscular frame, his dark hair styled back from a face that could have belonged to a Renaissance sculpture, if not for the cold intelligence in his dark eyes and the ink that marked his skin in deliberate patterns. A dragon's tail curled from beneath his collar, visible where he had left the top 2 buttons of his shirt open in calculated disregard for formality. His left hand, which now held Elena against him, bore rings that caught the light, silver and onyx, chosen for impact rather than ostentation. "Mr. Moretti," Adrian said, recovering his composure with visible effort. "Of course. Your reputation precedes you." "I'm certain it does." Luca's smile was all edges, nothing warm in it. "Elena was just telling me about an old acquaintance who once made the mistake of underestimating her value. I believe she mentioned he had a talent for making poor investment decisions." His fingers traced a small circle on Elena's hip, the gesture intimate and claiming an equal measure. "I've always believed the best investments are the ones others are too short-sighted to recognize." The ballroom seemed to hold its breath. Conversations nearby had gone quiet, people pretending not to listen while hanging on every word. Vanessa Ashford Blackwood looked between her husband and Luca with the dawning awareness that she was watching a confrontation far more significant than social posturing. Elena stood frozen, her heart hammering against her ribs, caught between the urge to step away from Luca's possessive touch and the darker satisfaction of watching Adrian's confident mask slip. "Elena and I have history," Adrian said, attempting to regain control of the conversation. "I'm glad to see she's landed on her feet, though I'm sure working for you must be." He paused, choosing his words with the care of someone crossing a minefield. "Challenging. Challenging." Luca repeated the word as if tasting it. "Yes, I imagine any position requiring competence rather than connections would seem challenging from your perspective." He pulled Elena fractionally closer, his body radiating controlled violence despite the civilized setting. "Elena handles challenges with remarkable grace. It's one of her many valuable qualities, among others." The implication hung in the air, deliberate and unmistakable. Elena felt her face flush, but she forced herself to remain still, to let this play out, even as her mind raced to understand what Luca was doing and why. He had always been professional with her, respectful of boundaries even as he brought her deeper into his world. This public claiming was new territory, and she couldn't tell if he was genuinely interested or simply enjoyed putting men like Adrian in their place. Adrian's jaw tightened. "I should introduce Vanessa to the Hendersons before dinner," he said, the retreat couched in social necessity. "Elena, it was unexpected to see you. Mr. Moretti, a pleasure." The last word came out strained, more obligation than truth. "The pleasure," Luca said softly, "was entirely mine." He waited until Adrian and Vanessa had disappeared into the crowd before his hand slid away from Elena's waist, leaving cold air where warmth had been. "Forgive the presumption. You looked like you could use an intervention." Elena finally allowed herself to breathe, turning to face him fully. Up close, Luca Moretti was even more overwhelming than usual, all controlled power and dangerous elegance. The ink on his neck continued up behind his ear, she noticed, disappearing into his hair in patterns she had never been close enough to trace. His dark eyes studied her with an intensity that made her feel exposed and seen in equal measure, as if he could read every thought she was attempting to hide. "That was him," she said quietly. "Adrian. The one I mentioned once, when you asked why I never dated." "I remember." Luca's expression shifted slightly, something predatory entering his features. "The fool who thought you weren't ambitious enough. I've been curious about the man stupid enough to let you go ever since." He plucked her untouched champagne from her hand and finished it in one smooth motion, his eyes never leaving hers. "He's exactly what I expected. All surface, no substance." "You didn't have to do that," Elena said, though she was unsure what exactly she was objecting to. The possessive touch, the public confrontation, the way her body still hummed with awareness from his proximity. "No," Luca agreed, setting the empty glass on a passing waiter's tray. "I didn't have to. I wanted to." He studied her face with unnerving focus. "Tell me, Elena, does he still affect you? Does seeing him bring back old feelings?" She considered lying, considered the safe response that would maintain their professional distance. But Luca had always valued honesty from her, even when it was uncomfortable. "He affects me," she admitted. "But not the way you might think. Not with longing or regret. With anger at who I allowed myself to become when I was with him. With satisfaction at who I am now, without him." "Good." The single word carried approval, and something darker. "Then perhaps you'll allow me to continue our performance. I believe your ex-boyfriend is watching from the terrace, and I've always believed in giving an audience what they need to see." He extended his hand to her, palm up, an invitation rather than a demand. "Dance with me, Elena." Let him watch what he was too blind to appreciate. Elena looked at his offered hand, at the silver rings and the subtle scars that marked his knuckles, evidence of a violence his expensive suits couldn't completely disguise. She thought about the safe response, about maintaining the professional boundaries that had served her well for 2 years. Then she thought about Adrian watching from the terrace, about the smug certainty with which he had dismissed her worth, about the years she had spent rebuilding herself in the aftermath of his careless cruelty. She placed her hand in Luca's. His fingers closed around hers with immediate possession, warm and strong and certain. "Show me," she said softly. "Show me what he lost." Luca's smile was dangerous and beautiful. "With pleasure." The orchestra had transitioned into something slower, something that required bodies to move closer together, rather than maintain the polite distance of faster tempos. Luca led Elena onto the dance floor with the confidence of a man who had never questioned his right to occupy any space he chose. Other couples made room instinctively, some recognition of power causing them to drift away like iron filings repelled by a magnet's wrong pole. Within moments, they had claimed the center of the floor, spotlighted by the chandeliers above, and observed by every person pretending not to stare. Elena's hand rested on Luca's shoulder, feeling the solid muscle beneath expensive fabric, her other hand engulfed by his larger one. His arm encircled her waist, pulling her closer than strictly necessary for the dance, close enough that she could feel his heartbeat against her chest steady and unhurried where hers raced. She had danced with him before, at corporate events where appearances mattered, but this felt different. Those had been performances of propriety. This was something else entirely. "You're tense," Luca observed, his voice pitched low enough that only she could hear. "Relax, Elena. I won't let you fall." "I'm not worried about falling," she replied, allowing him to guide her into the rhythm. "I'm worried about what happens after this dance ends. After this dance ends, we have dinner. Endure tedious speeches about causes that will receive a fraction of the money spent on this party. And then I take you home." His thumb traced a small circle on her lower back, a gesture so subtle that anyone watching would miss it, but she felt it like an electric current. Unless you're asking about something else. She met his eyes, those dark depths that held secrets she could only guess at. "Why are you doing this? We both know this isn't professional." "No," he agreed, spinning her gently before pulling her back in, closer than before. "It stopped being professional the moment he looked at you like you were something he had discarded and might pick up again if nothing better was available." His jaw tightened briefly, the only sign of the anger he kept leashed beneath his civilized exterior. "I don't allow anyone to treat what's mine with such disrespect." "I'm not yours," Elena said, though the protest sounded weak even to her own ears. "Aren't you?" Luca's question hung between them as he guided her through a turn, his movements precise despite the distraction of their conversation. "You've been at my side for 2 years, Elena. You know things about my business that could destroy me if shared with the wrong people. You've seen me at my worst, my most vulnerable, and never once betrayed that trust. You've made yourself essential to my life in ways that go far beyond typing my correspondence and managing my calendar." He leaned closer, his breath warm against her ear. "If that doesn't constitute belonging to me in some capacity, I don't know what does." The words should have frightened her, the possessiveness in his tone, the casual claim of ownership, the implicit threat in acknowledging she knew too much. All of it should have sent her running. But instead, she felt something unlock in her chest, some tension she hadn't known she was carrying finally releasing. Perhaps she had been his long before tonight, before Adrian reappeared, before this dance. Perhaps she had been his since the first time he had looked at her work and said "excellent" with genuine approval, or the first time he had asked her opinion and actually listened to her answer, or any of the 1,000 small moments when he had treated her as valuable rather than decorative. "He's watching," Elena murmured, catching sight of Adrian on the terrace through the tall windows. Even from this distance, she could see the rigid set of his shoulders, the way Vanessa stood beside him with her arms crossed, clearly displeased about something. "Good." Luca's hand slid slightly lower on her back, the touch bordering on inappropriate, but not quite crossing the line. "Let him see exactly what he threw away. Let him understand that you're not just surviving without him, you're thriving in ways he can't comprehend." "And what about after tonight?" Elena asked, voicing the question that had been building since Luca first touched her waist. "What happens when we're not putting on a show for my ex-boyfriend? Do we go back to pretending this is just a professional relationship?" Luca was quiet for several measures, guiding her through the dance with practiced ease while he considered his answer. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a weight that made her look up sharply. "I've spent 2 years pretending, Elena. 2 years watching you rebuild yourself into someone stronger than the broken girl Adrian Blackwood left behind. 2 years respecting the distance you needed to heal and find your own power." He pulled her flush against him, eliminating even the pretense of propriety, his dark eyes boring into hers. "But I'm done pretending. Seeing him tonight, seeing the way he looked at you like you were still that girl he could dismiss, it clarified something for me. You're not just essential to my business, you're essential to me. And I'm a man who protects what's essential." Elena's breath caught in her throat. She was aware of the stares now, no longer subtle, people openly watching their dance with fascination and speculation. The implications of being publicly claimed by Luca Moretti were not lost on her. He was not a man who made casual gestures or empty declarations. Whatever he was saying now, he meant absolutely, and that meant her life was about to change in ways she couldn't fully anticipate. "I don't need protection," she said, though her voice lacked conviction. "Everyone needs protection," Luca countered. "Even strong people, especially strong people, because they make enemies simply by refusing to break." His hand came up to cup her face, thumb brushing her cheekbone in a gesture so tender it seemed at odds with everything else about him. "I'm not offering to save you, Elena. I'm offering to stand beside you while you save yourself. But I'm also making it clear to every man in this room, especially the fool on the terrace, that you're under my protection now. Anyone who hurts you answers to me." The music swelled toward its conclusion, the final notes hanging in the air like a question waiting to be answered. Elena knew that whatever she said next would set the course for everything that followed. She could step back, thank him politely, and attempt to resurrect the professional boundaries that had kept her safe for 2 years. Or she could acknowledge the truth that had been building between them. Acknowledge that she wanted this dangerous man with his violent world and his unexpected tenderness. Wanted him in ways that had nothing to do with Adrian and everything to do with who Luca was when the rest of the world wasn't watching. The music ended. The ballroom erupted in polite applause. Luca held her gaze, waiting for her decision, his hand still cupping her face as if they were the only 2 people in the room. Through the windows, Elena could see Adrian watching, his face tight with an emotion she couldn't quite read, but suspected was rage tinged with regret. "Show me," Elena whispered, repeating her earlier words but with different meaning now. "Show him what he lost. Show everyone what it means to be yours." Something fierce and triumphant flared in Luca's eyes. Without warning, he pulled her against him and captured her mouth with his, kissing her with a possessiveness that stole her breath and her balance. The kiss was not gentle or tentative. It was claiming and absolute, a public declaration that left no room for misinterpretation. Elena heard gasps from the crowd, felt the weight of hundreds of eyes on them, but none of it mattered because Luca was kissing her like she was oxygen and he had been drowning. Her hands fisted in his shirt, pulling him closer, even as he dominated the kiss. With skill that spoke of experience she suddenly desperately wanted to be the beneficiary of. His tongue swept into her mouth with devastating precision, and she responded with a hunger that surprised them both. The world narrowed to the points where their bodies connected. His hand in her hair, her fingers gripping his shirt, his arm banded across her back, her lips moving against his with desperate need. When he finally pulled back, they were both breathing hard, and the ballroom had gone completely silent. Luca kept her pressed against him, his forehead resting against hers as he caught his breath. Then he turned his head slightly, just enough to see Adrian through the windows, and his expression shifted into something cold and satisfied. He leaned close to Elena's ear, his voice pitched to carry just far enough that the people nearest them would hear, knowing those whispers would spread through the room like wildfire. "Let him watch what he lost," Luca said, the words a dark promise. Let him spend the rest of his life knowing he had something precious and was too stupid to keep it. Elena felt something shift inside her chest, some final piece of her healing clicking into place. She had spent 3 years trying to prove to herself that she was worth more than Adrian's dismissal. But in this moment, with Luca Moretti claiming her in front of Miami's elite, she realized she had been seeking validation in the wrong place. She didn't need Adrian to regret losing her. She needed herself to stop mourning someone who had never deserved her in the first place. "I'm done looking back," she said softly, for Luca's ears alone. "If we're doing this, I'm all in. But I need to know what this is, what you want from me." Luca pulled back enough to see her face, his thumb tracing her swollen lower lip with devastating focus. "Everything," he said simply. "I want everything you're willing to give me, and I'll give you everything in return. My protection, my loyalty, my truth, even the parts that should frighten you. Because you've already seen the shadows I live in, Elena, and you've never flinched. You've never judged. You've simply been there, competent and steady and strong, making yourself impossible for me to ignore." Your world is dangerous," Elena said, needing to voice this truth before they went further. "I've glimpsed enough to know that being with you means accepting things I can't speak about, seeing things I can't unsee." "Yes." He offered no false reassurances, no promises that he would keep her separate from the darkness. "But you've been walking in that world for 2 years already, handling my legitimate business while knowing exactly what funds those enterprises. The only thing that's changing is that now, when I deal with threats, you'll know that some of those threats might be directed at you because of your association with me." His hand tightened in her hair, not painful, but possessive. "And you'll know that I will burn this city to ash before I let anyone hurt you. Is that something you can accept?" Elena thought about the safe life she could have chosen. The stable corporate job with a man who treated her as an interchangeable employee. The relationship with someone appropriate and boring, who would never kiss her like Luca just had, never make her feel like the most essential person in his universe. She thought about Adrian and his casual cruelty, about the years she had wasted trying to be enough for someone who had never valued what she offered. Then she looked at Luca Moretti, this dangerous, beautiful man who ruled the underworld and somehow saw her as precious, and made her choice. "I can accept it," she said, "on one condition." His eyebrow arched, intrigued. "Name it." "You respect that I'm not some delicate thing that needs to be kept in the dark. If I'm going to be with you, truly with you, then I need to understand your world fully. No sanitized versions, no protecting me from the truth. I'd rather face reality and choose you with open eyes than live in ignorance and false safety." For a long moment, Luca simply stared at her, something like wonder crossing his features. Then he smiled, and it was genuine warmth, rather than the cold satisfaction he had directed at Adrian. "You continue to surprise me, Elena Martinez. Most people beg me to keep them ignorant. You're demanding truth." "Most people," Elena said, "aren't worth your time." "No," Luca agreed, pulling her in for another kiss, this one softer but no less possessive. "They're not." When he released her, he kept her hand in his, turning to face the watching crowd with deliberate challenge. "Shall we give them something else to talk about? I believe dinner is about to be served, and I find I'm suddenly very hungry." As they walked off the dance floor together, Elena caught sight of their reflection in one of the tall mirrors that lined the ballroom. They looked devastating together, she had to admit. Her dark hair and midnight dress a perfect counterpoint to his dark suit and dangerous elegance, their bodies moving in sync like they had been designed to fit together. She looked powerful beside him, not diminished but amplified, her own strength complementing his rather than being overshadowed by it. Behind them, the ballroom erupted into furious whispers, speculations spreading like wildfire. Elena knew that by tomorrow, everyone in Miami would know that Luca Moretti had publicly claimed someone, something he had never done before. The implications would ripple outward, affecting business and social dynamics in ways she couldn't fully predict. She had just painted a target on her own back by associating herself so publicly with him. But as Luca guided her toward their table, his hand warm and solid in hers, Elena found she didn't care about the whispers or the implications, or even the danger. For the first time in 3 years, she felt alive rather than simply surviving. Whatever came next, whatever price this choice carried, she would face it with eyes wide open and this dangerous man at her side. Through the windows, she caught one final glimpse of Adrian, his face twisted with rage and something that might have been regret. Vanessa was already stalking away from him, clearly done with whatever scene he was creating. Elena felt a flash of satisfaction, sharp and sweet. But then Luca leaned close and whispered something darkly humorous in her ear, and she forgot about Adrian entirely. Some chapters of her life were finally, definitively closed, and some chapters were just beginning. Dinner passed in a haze of awareness, each course served and consumed, while Elena tried to process the seismic shift her life had just undergone. Luca kept her close throughout the meal, his hand finding hers under the table, his attention divided between the tedious conversation at their table and the much more interesting conversation his touch conducted against her skin. She was seated between him and Marcus Chen, one of Luca's business associates, a man whose legitimate investments in real estate masked less legitimate interests that Elena had learned not to ask about directly. "You've caused quite a stir tonight," Marcus observed quietly, his tone carefully neutral. He was one of the few people in Luca's orbit who treated Elena as an equal, rather than an ornament. "People are wondering if they should be sending congratulations or condolences." "Both, probably," Elena replied, managing a smile despite her racing thoughts. "Congratulations that I've apparently landed one of Miami's most eligible bachelors. Condolences that said bachelor comes with complications that make Game of Thrones look simple." Marcus barked a laugh, drawing attention from nearby tables. "I like her," he said to Luca, who had been talking to someone else but was clearly monitoring their conversation. "She's got humor about the situation. That's rare in our world." "She's got a lot of qualities that are rare," Luca said, his dark eyes settling on Elena with an intensity that made her skin warm. "Including the good sense to know exactly what she's getting into and choose it anyway." "Bold," Marcus acknowledged. "Though I suppose she'd have to be, working for you for 2 years and maintaining her sanity. Most of your assistants don't last 6 months before they realize you're more demanding than they anticipated." "Elena isn't most assistants," Luca said simply, as if that explained everything. Perhaps it did. The speeches began, the obligatory addresses from charity organizers and major donors, all carefully crafted to tug at heartstrings while celebrating the generosity of people who spent more on single evenings than many families saw in years. Elena had attended enough of these events to recognize the performance, the way guilt and pride were weaponized to extract donations. She watched Luca write a check during one particularly moving speech about children's education, the amount casual enough that he didn't even blink, large enough that several people at nearby tables craned their necks trying to see the figure. "Do you actually care about literacy programs?" Elena murmured. "Or is this just the price of admission to these circles?" "Both," Luca admitted. "I care because education is the only legitimate way out of the life I was born into, even if I chose to return to that world on my own terms as an adult, and it's absolutely the price of admission. If I don't donate generously to causes the elite care about, they start asking uncomfortable questions about where my money comes from." He signed the check with a flourish and handed it to the organizer who had approached their table. "It's cheaper to buy goodwill than to deal with investigations." "Pragmatic," Elena observed. "Always." He leaned closer, his voice dropping so only she could hear. "Are you all right? I know I've thrown you into the deep end tonight. If you need to leave, we can make excuses." Elena considered the offer, touched by his unexpected consideration. The old her, the girl Adrian had shaped into something anxious and uncertain, would have jumped at the escape route. But the woman she had become, the one who had survived and rebuilt and emerged stronger, wasn't interested in running. "I'm fine," she said, meeting his eyes. "Nervous, maybe, aware that everyone is watching us and speculating, but not fragile. I don't break easily anymore." Something fierce flashed in Luca's expression, approval and desire tangled together. "No," he agreed. "You don't. But knowing you're strong doesn't mean I won't destroy anyone who tries to test that strength." The casual violence in his tone should have been frightening. Instead, Elena felt protected in a way she hadn't experienced before. Adrian had claimed to care for her, but his version of care had been conditional, dependent on her meeting his standards and never embarrassing him. Luca's protection was absolute, unconditional, and probably illegal, in several ways she didn't want to examine too closely. Elena. The voice came from behind them, familiar and unwelcome. Adrian had apparently decided that Luca's public claiming wasn't sufficient deterrent to approach their table. He stood at a distance that was trying to seem casual, but telegraphed his nervousness, Vanessa conspicuously absent. "Could I speak with you privately for a moment?" Before Elena could respond, Luca's hand closed around her thigh under the table, possessive and warning. "Anything you need to say to Elena can be said here," he said, his tone pleasant in the way that dangerous men could sound pleasant while making threats. "In front of me." Adrian's jaw tightened. "This is a private matter between Elena and myself. Our history—" "Your history," Luca interrupted, still in that pleasantly deadly tone, "ended 3 years ago when you made the catastrophic error of deciding Elena wasn't worth your time. What you're attempting now is trespassing on someone who belongs to me. I'm trying to decide if I find that amusing or insulting." "She's not property," Adrian snapped, finally showing real emotion. "You can't just claim ownership of a person." "No," Luca agreed. "I can't. But Elena chose to accept my protection and my claim. She did so publicly, in front of everyone here, when she kissed me back like she was drowning, and I was air." He leaned back in his chair, the picture of relaxed confidence, but Elena could feel the coiled violence in him, ready to strike. "So I'll ask you again, more directly this time. What do you want with my Elena? What could you possibly have to say that would be worth the risk of annoying me?" Elena watched the color drain from Adrian's face as he finally understood who he was dealing with. Luca Moretti wasn't just wealthy and connected. He was dangerous in ways that couldn't be bought or negotiated with. Adrian had built his life on soft power, on connections, and inherited privilege. Luca had built his on something much harder and more unforgiving. "I wanted to apologize," Adrian said finally, the words clearly costing him something. "For how things ended between us. I was young and stupid, and I made a mistake letting you go." Elena felt Luca's grip on her thigh tighten slightly, waiting for her response. She could feel the attention of nearby tables, no longer even pretending not to listen. This moment would define how Miami's elite saw her, as someone with agency, or someone who could be passed between men like property. "You're apologizing," Elena said slowly, "because you see me with someone powerful, and you're worried you made a strategic error. Not because you hurt me. Not because you spent 2 years systematically destroying my confidence and then discarded me like I was nothing. But because I ended up somewhere you didn't expect, with someone you can't compete with." She stood, forcing Adrian to step back, Luca rising smoothly beside her. "Your apology is 3 years too late and motivated by all the wrong reasons. I don't accept it, and I need you to understand something clearly. I'm not with Luca because I needed someone to prove my worth to you. I'm with him because he saw my worth when I couldn't see it myself, because he treated me with respect when you were teaching me to accept less, because he's the kind of man who keeps his promises even when they're difficult." She stepped closer to Adrian, holding his gaze. "You didn't make a mistake letting me go, Adrian. I made a mistake staying with you as long as I did. The only thing I regret is the time I wasted trying to be enough for someone who was never going to value me." Adrian's face flushed red. "You think you're better than me now because you're sleeping with—" He didn't finish the sentence. Luca moved with shocking speed for a man his size, his hand closing around Adrian's throat with enough pressure to choke off words but not air. The entire ballroom seemed to freeze, conversation dying mid-sentence as everyone turned to watch. "Choose your next words very carefully," Luca said softly, his voice carrying despite the intimate proximity of the threat. because the only reason you're still breathing is that Elena has a kind heart and wouldn't want me to ruin this charity event by throwing you through a window. But my patience has limits, and you've just found one." He released Adrian with a small push that sent the other man stumbling backward. "Elena's worth more than you'll ever comprehend. The fact that you're trying to diminish her choices as being about you proves exactly how small you are. Now leave, before I forget that I'm trying to be civilized tonight." Adrian fled, stumbling slightly in his haste to put distance between himself and Luca. Vanessa appeared from somewhere near the bar, falling into step beside him with her face carefully neutral, though Elena caught the flash of satisfaction in her eyes. Apparently, Vanessa had her own grievances with her husband. The ballroom remained frozen for another heartbeat, then slowly, deliberately, someone began to clap. Elena turned to see Marcus Chen applauding slowly, a broad smile on his face. Others joined in, and within seconds, a significant portion of the room was applauding, though whether they were celebrating Luca's defense of her or simply acknowledging his dominance display, Elena wasn't sure. "I think," Luca said, pulling Elena close against his side, "we've provided enough entertainment for one evening. Would you like to leave? I can have the car brought around." Elena nodded, suddenly exhausted by the emotional whiplash of the night. As they made their way toward the exit, people parted like water around them, some offering congratulations, others simply staring with fascination or fear. Elena kept her head high, her hand in Luca's, refusing to show any uncertainty, even as her mind raced trying to process everything that had happened. Outside, Miami's humid night air hit her like a wall after the ballroom's climate control. The valet had already brought Luca's car around, a sleek black Mercedes that probably cost more than most people's houses. He held the door for her, his hand at the small of her back guiding her inside, then circled around to the driver's side. The interior was quiet luxury, leather and expensive electronics, and as Luca pulled away from the hotel, Elena finally allowed herself to breathe fully for the first time in hours. They drove in silence for several minutes, the city lights sliding past the windows, before Luca finally spoke. "I'm sorry," he said quietly, "for putting you in that position, for making you deal with him in such a public way. I let my anger at how he treated you override my consideration for how you might want to handle seeing him again." Elena turned to look at him, surprised by the apology. "You're sorry for defending me?" "I'm sorry for assuming you needed defending," Luca clarified. "You handled him perfectly. Better than I did, actually. My solution was violence. Yours was truth. That's always been the difference between us." "I liked that you wanted to defend me," Elena admitted. "Adrian never did. Whenever someone was rude to me or dismissive, he would tell me I was being too sensitive, that I needed to develop thicker skin. Having someone actually get angry on my behalf was..." She trailed off, searching for the right word. "Validating." "He's a fool," Luca said flatly. "And that's the last time his name crosses my lips tonight. I don't want to spend what's left of this evening discussing men who never deserved your time." He glanced at her as they stopped at a red light. "Where am I taking you? Home? Or somewhere else?" The question was weighted with meaning. Home meant her apartment, meant space and time to process, meant maintaining some distance while they figured out what this new dynamic between them would look like. Somewhere else meant his penthouse, meant no distance, meant diving into whatever this was with both feet and no safety net. Elena thought about the safe choice, the careful choice, the choice that would give her time to be certain. Then she thought about Luca's kiss, about the way he had held her like she was precious and claimed her like she was essential, about the fact that she had already spent 3 years being careful and safe, and it had only led to loneliness and professional competence without personal joy. "Somewhere else," she said softly. "Your place. I don't want to be alone tonight." Luca's hand found hers across the center console, threading their fingers together. You won't be, he promised. Not tonight. Not any night you don't want to be. As they drove through Miami's glittering streets toward whatever came next, Elena felt that same sensation from the dance floor. Of chapters closing and chapters beginning. Of becoming someone new, while reclaiming parts of herself she had lost. The girl Adrian had broken was gone, replaced by a woman who knew her worth and chose dangerous, beautiful men who saw it too. Behind them, the Hotel Mirabella's lights faded into the distance, and with them, the last remnants of a life Elena no longer wanted. Luca's penthouse occupied the top 3 floors of a building in Brickell, the windows offering panoramic views of Miami's skyline and Biscayne Bay beyond. Elena had been here before, of course, for work, collecting documents, waiting while Luca finished business calls, occasionally staying late when deals required her presence. But entering now, with his hand at the small of her back and the explicit understanding of what this visit meant, everything felt different. The space that had been impressive, but impersonal, transformed into something intimate, charged with possibility, and the kind of nervous anticipation that came with crossing thresholds that couldn't be uncrossed. The elevator opened directly into his living space, a testament to wealth and security concerns in equal measure. The decor was masculine elegance, dark leather furniture, exposed brick walls, carefully chosen art that suggested both wealth and taste. But Elena noticed details now that she hadn't paid attention to before. The books stacked on the coffee table weren't for show. They were worn, actually read, their spines creased with use. A chess set sat on a side table mid-game, as if he had been playing against himself. Personal photographs in simple frames showed a younger Luca, with people she assumed were family, his arm around an older woman with his same dark eyes, the Sicilian countryside golden behind them. "You're nervous," Luca observed, shrugging out of his jacket and hanging it with care before turning to face her fully. "Second thoughts?" "No," Elena said honestly, setting her clutch on the entry table. "Not second thoughts. Just processing. 6 hours ago, I was your assistant preparing for a boring charity event. Now I'm in your penthouse after you publicly claimed me in front of half of Miami's elite and physically threatened my ex-boyfriend. It's a lot of change for one evening." "It is," Luca agreed, moving toward the bar and pouring 2 glasses of something amber and expensive. "Which is why we're going to slow down. No expectations, Elena. You're here because neither of us wanted to be alone tonight, because the evening was intense, and we both need to decompress. Anything else that happens is a choice, not an obligation." He handed her one of the glasses, and Elena recognized the gesture for what it was, a return of control, a reminder that she had agency even here, even with him. She took a sip of the whiskey, feeling it burn pleasantly down her throat, warming her from the inside. "And if I said I didn't want to slow down? If I said I've spent 2 years being careful and controlled and I'm tired of it?" Luca's eyes darkened with interest, but he maintained his distance. "Then I would ask if you're certain that's what you want, and not just adrenaline and vindication talking. Because once we cross certain lines, Elena, there's no going back to what we were. Our professional relationship will be complicated by personal entanglement. Your safety will be more at risk because being with me romantically paints a larger target on you than being my assistant ever did. People who want to hurt me will see you as leverage." He set his own glass down untouched. "I need you to understand that before you make decisions you can't unmake." "I understand," Elena said, moving closer to him deliberately, watching his control strain as she invaded his space. "I've understood for longer than you might think. Did you know I can tell when you're dealing with something violent? You come back to the office with a particular kind of tension, a hardness in your eyes that takes hours to fade. Did you know I've covered for you with legitimate business partners, created alibis without you even asking because I understood instinctively what needed to be protected? I've been complicit in your world for 2 years, Luca. The only thing that's changing is the nature of that complicity." "Elena." Her name came out rough, strained. You don't know what you're asking for. Don't I? She set her own glass down and stepped closer still, close enough to feel the heat radiating from his body. You think I don't understand that being with you means accepting darkness? That sometimes you'll come home with blood under your fingernails that no amount of washing can fully clean? That I'll know things I can never speak about and see things that will give me nightmares? She placed her hand flat against his chest, feeling his heart race beneath her palm. I'm not naive, Luca. I'm just done pretending I want safe and boring when what I actually want is standing right in front of me. For a long moment, Luca stood perfectly still, some internal battle playing out behind his eyes. Then something in him broke, or maybe chose, and he pulled her against him with barely restrained force, his mouth crashing down on hers with the kind of hunger that had been building for far longer than one evening. This kiss was different from the one at the gala, that had been performance and claiming. This was need, raw and desperate. 2 years of professional distance dissolving in the space between one breath and the next. Elena's hands fisted in his shirt, pulling him impossibly closer as his tongue swept into her mouth with devastating skill. He tasted like whiskey and want, and she responded with a hunger that matched his, all the pent-up tension of their careful professional relationship exploding into this moment of permission. His hands roamed her back, finding the zipper of her dress and lowering it with agonizing slowness, his fingers tracing the newly exposed skin with reverent attention. Bedroom, Elena gasped against his mouth, impatient with the slow reveal. No. Luca's voice was rough with desire, but firm with intent. Not bedroom, not for this first time. I've waited too long, watched you too many years, wanted this too much to rush it in the dark. He guided her backward toward the floor-to-ceiling windows, Miami's lights creating a glowing backdrop. I want to see every expression, every reaction. I want you to know exactly who's touching you, who's worshiping you the way you deserve. The dress slipped from her shoulders, pooling at her feet in a whisper of expensive fabric. Elena stood before him in just her heels and undergarments, exposed and vulnerable, but refusing to cover herself, refusing to show uncertainty, even as her heart raced. Luca stepped back, his eyes tracking over her with an intensity that made her skin flush, cataloging every curve and plane like he was memorizing her. Beautiful, he murmured, reaching up to loosen his tie with deliberate slowness. I've imagined this so many times, Elena. But reality is so much better than imagination. The tie joined her dress on the floor, followed by his shirt, revealing the muscular torso she had only glimpsed before, marked with more ink than she had realized. A dragon coiled across his ribs, flames licking up toward his shoulder. Script in Italian wound around his forearm. Each mark told a story she wanted to learn, wanted to trace with her fingers and mouth until she understood every piece of him. She reached for him, but he caught her wrists gently, holding her hands captive. Not yet. I need you to understand something first. His dark eyes burned into hers. I'm not a gentleman, Elena. I've done things that would horrify you if you knew the details. I've hurt people, killed people, built an empire on violence and fear and careful strategy. The man who kissed you at the gala is the same man who has ordered executions and destroyed lives without losing sleep. He released one of her wrists to cup her face, thumb brushing her cheek with unexpected tenderness. But with you, I want to be different. I want to be the man you deserve, even though I know I'm not. So if we do this, if you really want this, you need to tell me. Clear consent, Elena. No ambiguity. Elena understood what he was offering. A final chance to step back, to reconsider, to choose safety over passion. Adrian had never asked for consent, had simply assumed his right to her body the way he had assumed his right to her time and attention and emotional labor. But Luca, this dangerous man who ruled an empire built on violence, was asking permission with a vulnerability that made her throat tight. I want this, she said clearly, holding his gaze. I want you, not despite who you are, but including who you are. The darkness, the violence, the empire. I've known about it and I've never flinched. I'm not going to start now." She pulled her hand free from his grip and placed it over his heart, feeling the racing beat beneath. "I consent, Luca, completely, enthusiastically. Take me apart and put me back together. Show me what it means to be yours." The words unleashed something in him. He lifted her effortlessly, her legs wrapping around his waist as he pinned her against the window, the glass cool against her back while his body burned against her front. The contrast made her gasp, and he swallowed the sound with another devastating kiss, his hips pressing forward in a rhythm that promised everything and delivered enough to make her desperate. "Tell me," he growled against her neck, his teeth grazing the sensitive skin there. "Tell me what you want. I need to hear you say it." "Everything," Elena breathed, echoing his words from earlier in the evening. "I want everything with you." What followed was revelation and claiming in equal measure. Luca touched her like he was learning scripture, reverent and thorough, mapping every response until he knew exactly how to make her gasp, moan, beg. He was demanding but attentive, pushing her to edges she hadn't known existed while making sure she felt safe enough to fall. When he finally entered her, pinning her against the window with Miami glittering beneath them, Elena felt something fundamental shift in her understanding of intimacy. This wasn't just physical, wasn't just two bodies seeking pleasure. This was connection, profound and terrifying, the kind of merging that changed you on a cellular level. "Look at me," Luca commanded, his voice strained with the effort of maintaining control. "I want you seeing me when you come. I want you knowing exactly who's doing this to you." Elena forced her eyes open, meeting his dark gaze as he moved inside her with devastating precision. She could see everything in his expression. Desire, possession, something deeper that might have been love, or might have been obsession, or might have been both tangled so completely that separation was impossible. And in that moment, with Miami as their witness and pleasure building toward something catastrophic, Elena finally understood what it meant to be claimed by someone who would burn the world for you. When she shattered, it was with his name on her lips and his eyes locked on hers, and she took him with her over that edge, both of them falling together into something that felt terrifyingly like forever. After, when they had collapsed together on his couch, limbs tangled and hearts still racing, Luca pulled a throw blanket over them and held her against his chest like she was precious fragile. Elena traced the dragon on his ribs, following the ink's path with gentle fingers. "What does it mean?" she asked softly. "The dragon." "Protection and power," Luca answered, his hand stroking her hair with absent affection. "My grandfather had the same tattoo. In our family, it marks the ones who carry the weight of protecting everyone else." He caught her hand, bringing it to his lips. "I got it when I was 19, after my first kill. A reminder that power requires sacrifice, that sometimes we do monstrous things for the right reasons." "Tell me," Elena said, lifting her head to look at him. "Not about the kill specifically, but about who you are when you're not being Miami's respectable businessman." "I meant what I said. I want the truth, Luca. All of it." So he told her. Not everything, not the operational details that would genuinely endanger her, but the truth of his world. About his grandfather's immigration from Sicily, about building power in Miami's underworld through strategy and violence in equal measure, about the legitimate businesses that laundered money and the illegal enterprises that generated it. He told her about the codes he lived by, the lines he wouldn't cross even in a world built on crossing lines. He told her about the families under his protection, the businesses that paid for his shield, the politicians and police who took his money and looked the other way. And Elena listened, asking questions, seeking understanding rather than judgment, because she had meant every word. She wasn't here to fix him or save him or pretend his world was something other than what it was. She was here to stand beside him in that world, to be the person he could be honest with when everyone else demanded comfortable lies. "You should be horrified," Luca said finally, studying her face for signs of the disgust or fear he clearly expected. "I'm not," Elena said simply. "I'm scared, maybe, aware of the stakes in a way I wasn't before, but not horrified. Because the man who told me all of that is the same man who respects my boundaries, who asks for consent, who just made love to me like I was something precious." She pressed a kiss to his chest, right over his racing heart. "You're not a monster, Luca. You're a man who operates in a monstrous world and somehow maintains honor within it. That's not nothing." Elena. Her name came out rough, overwhelmed. "You're going to destroy me. You realize that? I've spent 20 years building walls, maintaining distance, and you're going to knock all of it down and leave me vulnerable in ways that could get me killed." "Then we'll just have to make sure you don't get killed," Elena said, with a confidence she didn't entirely feel. "Because I didn't go through the hell of reconstructing myself after Adrian just to lose you now that I've found you." Luca pulled her closer, his arms banding around her with protective possession. "No one touches you," he said, and it was promise and threat combined. "Not Adrian, not rivals, not anyone. You're mine now, Elena, and I protect what's mine with everything I am." "And I'm yours," Elena agreed, surrendering to the inevitable. "For better or worse, in darkness and light. We're in this together, now." Outside the windows, Miami gleamed in the darkness, beautiful and dangerous, and full of possibilities both glorious and terrifying. And inside Luca's penthouse, two people who had been cautiously circling each other for years finally stopped pretending they didn't want to collide. The night stretched ahead of them, full of whispered confessions and shared vulnerabilities, bodies learning each other with patient thoroughness, building something that would either save them both or destroy them completely. Either way, there was no going back. They had crossed the line, and on the other side waited a future neither of them could fully predict, but both of them were willing to fight for. The morning arrived with brutal sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows, and Elena woke in Luca's bed with the ache of someone who had been thoroughly loved, and the confusion of someone whose life had fundamentally shifted overnight. Luca was already awake, propped against the headboard with a tablet in hand, conducting business despite the early hour, but his other hand rested in her hair, fingers moving through the tangled strands with absent affection, anchoring her even as he worked. "What time is it?" Elena mumbled, not yet ready to face the reality of morning and the implications it brought. 7, Luca said, setting the tablet aside to focus on her completely. "I let you sleep as long as possible, but we need to talk about practical matters before the day gets away from us." Elena sat up, pulling the sheet with her in an attempt at modesty that made Luca's lips quirk with amusement. "Practical matters sounds ominous." "Necessary," he corrected, pushing her hair back from her face with gentle fingers. "Last night changed things, Elena. By now, everyone who matters in Miami knows you're under my protection. That makes you a target for my enemies and an asset for my allies. We need to discuss security measures." The clinical tone he used for the word security measures sent a chill down Elena's spine. This was the reality of choosing Luca Moretti. Not just passionate nights and public claiming, but genuine danger from people who would hurt her to weaken him. "What kind of security measures?" "Driver," Luca said, ticking items off on his fingers. "Trained in defensive and evasive maneuvers. Bodyguard for public events, at least until we're certain there's no immediate threat. Changes to your apartment's security system or..." He paused, watching her face carefully. "You could move in here. This building has better security than anything else in Miami. and I'd sleep better knowing you were protected." "That's fast," Elena said, though she couldn't deny the appeal. "We've been officially together for less than 12 hours and you're already asking me to move in." "I'm asking you to be safe," Luca corrected, but his voice softened. "But yes, it's fast. If you're not ready for that step, I understand. We can upgrade your place instead. I just need you protected, Elena. The people who move in my world don't play by civilized rules." Elena processed this, weighing independence against security, familiar space against the comfort of proximity to Luca. "Can I think about it? The moving in part, I mean. I'll accept the security upgrades wherever I'm staying, because I'm not stupid enough to refuse protection when you're telling me I need it." "Of course." Relief flashed across Luca's face, as if he had been worried she would reject all of it. "There's something else. Your position at the company. People are going to talk, Elena. They're going to assume you slept your way into your job, that everything you've accomplished was because I wanted you in my bed, rather than because of your actual competence." "Let them talk," Elena said with more confidence than she felt. "I know my worth. You know my worth. Anyone who matters knows I earned my position long before last night happened." "Still," Luca pressed, "I want to offer you a choice. You can continue as my executive assistant, and we'll deal with the whispers together. Or I can promote you to a different position, put you in charge of one of the legitimate divisions where your talent would be obvious to everyone. Same salary increase you would have gotten anyway, but with a title that makes it clear you're valued for your mind, not your relationship with me." It was a generous offer, Elena recognized, and one that showed Luca understood the professional complications their relationship created. "What do you want?" she asked. "Honestly, which option works better for you?" Luca was quiet for a moment, considering. "Selfishly, I want you at my side. I want you in my office, handling my schedule, present for meetings, close enough that I can see you throughout the day. But that's about my comfort, not your career. You're better than an assistant position, Elena. You have business instincts I could use in a dozen different capacities. So the real question is, what do you want?" Elena thought about it, weighing options and implications. "I want to stay your assistant," she said finally. "Not because I'm afraid of a bigger role, but because I like being that close to the center of things. I like knowing everything that's happening, being the person you trust with sensitive information. If I take a division role, I'll be more legitimate in others' eyes, but I'll be further from you and from the parts of your business that really matter." She met his eyes steadily. "I'm all in, Luca. That means I want to be where the action is, not sequestered in some respectable division managing projects I don't care about." "You're sure?" Luca pressed. "Because once people perceive you as my partner in both senses, they'll start coming to you with requests, trying to use you as leverage to get to me. They'll test you, looking for weakness. Some of my associates aren't kind to women, and they'll resent your influence. Then they'll learn to be kind or face consequences," Elena said with a steel she didn't know she possessed until that moment. "I'm not the girl Adrian broke anymore, Luca. I'm the woman you claimed last night. And if that means facing down misogynistic criminals and teaching them to respect me, then that's what I'll do." Pride and concern warred in Luca's expression. "You're magnificent," he murmured, pulling her in for a kiss that promised to derail the conversation entirely. But he pulled back with visible effort. "But we still need to address the elephant in the room. Adrian." Elena stiffened. "What about him?" "He's not going to let this go," Luca said bluntly. "Men like him, entitled, used to getting what they want. They don't handle rejection well. And last night was very public rejection in front of people whose opinions he values. He's going to retaliate somehow." "Let him try," Elena said, anger flaring. "What's he going to do? He has no power over me anymore." He has connections, Luca countered. And he's stupid enough when injured pride is involved to do something reckless. I'm having him watched, but I need you to be careful. Don't go anywhere alone, especially not places you went together. If he approaches you, don't engage. Call me immediately. The protective intensity in Luca's voice was simultaneously comforting and concerning. You think he's dangerous, Adrian? Elena couldn't quite reconcile the image of her ex-boyfriend, all smooth charm and corporate networking, with genuine threat. I think any man who's been publicly humiliated is potentially dangerous, especially if he has resources and motivation. Luca's expression was serious. I've seen men do terrible things to women who rejected them, Elena. I won't risk you because we underestimated his capacity for vindictiveness. They were interrupted by Luca's phone buzzing with insistent urgency. He glanced at the screen and his expression darkened. It's Marcus. I need to take this. Elena nodded, using the privacy to gather her scattered clothes from the night before and retreat to the bathroom. Her reflection in the mirror showed someone who looked thoroughly loved. Kiss-swollen lips, marks on her neck that Luca's mouth had left deliberately visible, her hair a tangle of sex and sleep. She looked different than she had 24 hours ago, she realized. Something in her eyes was fiercer, more certain, like she had found a piece of herself that had been missing and now felt complete. When she emerged, dressed in her rumpled gala outfit and feeling somewhat ridiculous, Luca was waiting with his expression grim. We have a problem. What kind of problem? The kind where your ex-boyfriend is even stupider than I gave him credit for. Luca showed her his phone, displaying a screenshot Marcus had forwarded. It was a Facebook post from Adrian, carefully worded, but clear in its implications. Warnings about Elena being involved with organized crime, suggestions that she was complicit in illegal activities, veiled accusations wrapped in concern-trolling rhetoric. Elena felt her blood run cold. He's trying to ruin my reputation. He's trying, Luca agreed. But he's doing it so clumsily that it's going to backfire spectacularly. Making allegations about me on social media is the fastest way to learn why people fear me. His voice had gone cold, the warmth he showed her replaced by something harder. I need to handle this, Elena. But I need you to understand what handling this means. Will you hurt him? Elena asked, surprised by how little the prospect bothered her. Not permanently, Luca said. Not unless he escalates. But I will make it very clear that coming after you was a mistake he'll regret for however long I allow him to keep regretting things. He cupped her face, his thumb brushing her cheek. This is what I meant last night. Being with me means witnessing consequences. It means knowing I will do violent, illegal things to protect you. Can you live with that? Elena thought about Adrian's smug face as he had approached their table, the entitlement in his voice as he had tried to diminish her choices. She thought about 3 years of rebuilding herself after his casual cruelty, about the scars that still ached when she let herself remember how small he had made her feel. And she thought about Luca, this dangerous man who treated her like she was precious, who had publicly claimed her and would burn the city to keep her safe. Yes, she said simply. I can live with that. In fact, I think I prefer it to the alternative of letting him think he can attack me without consequences. Luca's expression shifted, something fierce and approving entering his features. You understand that makes you complicit? That knowing I'm going to hurt him and approving means you're as much a part of his world now as I am? I crossed that line when I kissed you back last night, Elena said. When I came here knowing what you are and what being with you would mean. I'm not innocent anymore, Luca, and I'm okay with that. Adrian chose to make himself your enemy. He gets to live with what that means. Then I need to go, Luca said, but he pulled her in for one more kiss, this one deeper and more possessive than necessary. Stay here. The security system is active, and Marcus is sending someone to watch the building. I'll have clothes and toiletries brought up for you. Make yourself comfortable. This might take a few hours. Be careful, Elena said, surprised by how much she meant it, how quickly he had become essential to her sense of safety. Always. He kissed her forehead with unexpected tenderness. And Elena, thank you for choosing this, for choosing me, even knowing the cost. After he left, Elena explored the penthouse more thoroughly, finding evidence of the man behind the reputation in unexpected places. The kitchen was well stocked with actual food, not just the expensive wine and takeout containers she might have expected from a bachelor. The bookshelves held an eclectic mix: Italian classics alongside American thriller fiction, books on philosophy next to books on military strategy. A guitar sat in one corner, worn with use, and Elena had a sudden vision of Luca playing late at night when sleep wouldn't come. She was examining a photograph of what appeared to be Luca as a teenager, standing with an older man in front of a Sicilian villa, when her phone buzzed with multiple notifications. Against her better judgment, she checked them. The first was from an unknown number. I'm trying to save you from making a terrible mistake. Call me. Adrian. The second was from her mother. Saw the video from last night. Call me immediately. We need to discuss your choices. The third was from her college roommate. OMG, who is this man and where can I find one? Elena deleted Adrian's message without responding, and decided her mother's concern could wait until she had more emotional bandwidth. But she clicked on the link her roommate had sent, which led to a social media video clearly taken at the gala. It showed Luca kissing her with devastating thoroughness, the entire ballroom watching, followed by his whispered words that the video's creator had somehow captured with remarkable clarity. Let him watch what he lost. The video had thousands of views already, dozens of comments, most of them variations on appreciation for the drama and speculation about Luca's identity. Some comments were less flattering, warnings about his reputation, suggestions that Elena didn't know what she was getting into, moral judgments from people who knew nothing about her or her choices. Elena read through them with detached interest, recognizing that her life had just become public property in ways she hadn't fully anticipated. This was the price of being with someone like Luca. Not just the physical danger, but the scrutiny, the judgment, the loss of privacy that came with dating a man who commanded attention and fear in equal measure. Her phone rang, an unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. Hello? Elena Martinez? The voice was male, professional, unfamiliar. This is Detective James Morrison with Miami PD. I'd like to ask you a few questions about your relationship with Luca Moretti. Elena's heart stuttered. I'm sorry, Detective, but I have nothing to say to you without my attorney present. Your attorney. The detective's voice carried skepticism. You have an attorney already? That was fast. I work for a prominent businessman, Elena said carefully, remembering every legal drama she had ever watched. Having legal representation is simply prudent. If you'd like to schedule a formal interview, you can contact my lawyer and arrange it. Otherwise, I have nothing more to say. She hung up before he could respond, her hands shaking slightly. This was real. This wasn't just danger from Luca's enemies. This was legal scrutiny, law enforcement interest, the kind of attention that could unravel her entire life if she wasn't careful. When Luca returned 3 hours later, he found Elena curled on his couch with a glass of wine, staring at the Miami skyline without really seeing it. He took one look at her face and moved immediately to her side, pulling her against him without asking what was wrong. Tell me, he said simply. So she did. About the detective's call, about Adrian's message, about the video going viral, and the comments that ranged from supportive to vicious. She told him about the fear that had settled in her chest, the growing awareness that she had stepped into a world much larger and more dangerous than she had fully grasped last night, in the heat of passion and vindication. Luca listened without interrupting, his hand stroking her back with patient comfort, When she finally wound down, he kissed the top of her head and said, "First, I'm calling my attorney immediately. He'll represent you if the police pursue this, and he's the best in Miami at making investigations disappear. Second, Adrian won't be contacting you again. I've made it very clear what will happen if he does." "What did you do?" Elena asked, not entirely sure she wanted to know. "Nothing permanent," Luca assured her. But he understands now that his social media campaign was remarkably stupid. His accounts have been deleted, his posts removed, and he's been encouraged strongly to leave Miami for an extended period. If he refuses, then consequences escalate. But I suspect he's smart enough to take the exit being offered. "You're sure he'll go?" "I showed him photographs," Luca said flatly. "Photographs of what happens to people who make me truly angry. And I explained that attacking you made me very, very angry. So yes, I'm quite sure he'll go." Elena processed this, the casual violence of it, the efficiency with which Luca had neutralized a threat. She should have felt horror, she thought, should have been disturbed by how easily he could terrorize someone into exile. Instead, she felt safe, protected, like she had finally found someone who would actually keep her secure, rather than just promising to. "I love you," she said suddenly, surprising herself with the declaration. Luca went very still. "Elena, I know it's fast," she continued, the words tumbling out now that she had started. "I know it's probably just adrenaline and intensity and the aftermath of confronting Adrian. But I need you to know. Whatever happens next, however complicated this gets, I love you. Not because you're protecting me, though I appreciate that. Not because you're powerful, or wealthy, or dangerous. But because when I'm with you, I remember who I wanted to be before Adrian convinced me I was worthless. Because you see me, Luca, really see me, including the broken parts, and you treat all of it like it's valuable." For a long moment, Luca simply stared at her, his dark eyes intense with an emotion she couldn't quite name. Then he kissed her, gentle this time rather than passionate, like she was something fragile that required careful handling. "I loved you long before last night," he admitted against her lips. "I've loved you since you handled a supplier meeting when I was dealing with a crisis, since you made decisions without waiting for permission, because you understood what I needed, even when I couldn't articulate it. I've loved you since you looked at the darkness in my world and didn't run, didn't demand I change, just learned to navigate it alongside me." He pulled back to see her face clearly. "So yes, Elena, I love you too. Desperately. Dangerously, in ways that probably aren't healthy, but feel more real than anything else in my life." They stayed like that for a long time, holding each other while Miami buzzed with life beyond the windows, while Adrian fled the city he had once considered his domain, while Luca's enemies plotted and planned and looked for weaknesses they wouldn't find because Elena Martinez was not a weakness. She was the thing that made Luca Moretti stronger than he had ever been alone. Outside, the sun began its descent toward evening, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, beautiful and temporary like everything else worth having. And inside Luca's penthouse, two people who had found each other against all odds, held on tight, and prepared for whatever came next. Because in their world, happy endings weren't guaranteed. They were fought for, protected with violence and devotion in equal measure, earned through surviving every attempt to tear them apart. And Elena and Luca were just getting started. The weeks following the gala fell into a rhythm both exhilarating and exhausting, as Elena navigated her new role as both Luca's professional right hand and his publicly acknowledged partner. The transition wasn't seamless. Some of his associates struggled to accept her authority, testing boundaries until Luca made it painfully clear that disrespecting Elena was equivalent to disrespecting him. One particularly obtuse lieutenant learned this lesson after making a crude comment about her position, and while Elena never learned the specifics of his punishment, the man apologized with genuine terror the next time he saw her and never made that mistake again. She moved into the penthouse after 2 weeks, accepting that her apartment's security upgrades still couldn't match the fortress Luca had built for himself. Besides, she admitted privately, she slept better wrapped in his arms, the steady rhythm of his breathing beside her, the only thing that quieted the occasional nightmares about Adrian or detectives, or the shadowy enemies who existed at the periphery of Luca's world. Her belongings integrated seamlessly into his space, her books joining his on the shelves, her clothes claiming half his enormous closet, her presence transforming the penthouse from a bachelor's domain into something that felt like home. The legal scrutiny Elena had feared materialized more slowly than expected, but Detective Morrison remained persistently interested in her relationship with Luca. She attended 3 interviews with Luca's attorney present, answering questions with careful honesty about her legitimate work, while revealing nothing about the shadows where real power moved. Morrison was smart enough to know she was holding back, and frustrated by his inability to crack her composure. But without concrete evidence of wrongdoing, he could do nothing but watch and wait for mistakes they were careful not to make. Adrian, as promised, had left Miami. Elena heard through mutual acquaintances that he had taken a position with his father's company's New York office, that Vanessa had filed for divorce citing irreconcilable differences, that his social circle had largely abandoned him after his spectacular public humiliation. She felt no triumph at his downfall, discovering that the vindication she had imagined tasted more like indifference. He had been significant once, had shaped years of her life through his casual cruelty. But now he was simply irrelevant, a footnote in the story of how she had become the woman who stood at Luca Moretti's side without flinching. But Adrian's absence didn't eliminate threats. It simply made room for new ones. 6 weeks after the gala, Elena was working late in Luca's home office, reviewing quarterly reports for one of his legitimate shipping companies, when Luca burst through the door with an urgency that immediately sent her adrenaline spiking. "We need to go," he said without preamble, already pulling her to her feet. "Now, there's been a development." "What kind of development?" Elena asked, abandoning her computer and grabbing her phone. "The kind where a rival decided that since they can't hurt me directly, they'll go after what I value most." His jaw was tight with controlled fury as he guided her toward the private elevator that led to the penthouse's secured garage. "I've got security mobilizing, but until I know how serious the threat is, I'm getting you somewhere safe." They drove through Miami's streets with Marcus at the wheel, Luca making rapid-fire calls in Italian, while Elena tried to calm her racing heart. The something safe turned out to be a heavily guarded estate in Coral Gables, one of several properties Luca maintained for exactly these contingencies. The house was beautiful in that impersonal way of places designed for function rather than living, all clean lines and security features disguised as architectural elements. "How long do I need to stay here?" Elena asked once they were inside, watching through bulletproof windows as armed men positioned themselves around the perimeter. "Until I've dealt with the threat," Luca said, his attention divided between his phone and her face. "A day, maybe 2. Lorenzo Salvatore has decided to make a play for my territory, and he's stupid enough to think threatening you will make me weak." His expression was cold fury, the civilized veneer completely stripped away to reveal the dangerous man beneath. He's about to learn exactly how wrong that assumption is. "Let me stay with you," Elena said impulsively. "I'm safer at your side than hidden away like some fragile thing that needs protecting." "No." The word was absolute, non-negotiable. "This is the part where you trust me to handle things, Elena, where you let me do what I do best without worrying that a stray bullet might catch you. I can't be strategic if I'm constantly concerned about your safety. I need you here, secured, so I can focus on making Lorenzo regret ever speaking your name." Elena wanted to argue, to insist on her right to stand beside him in all aspects of his life. But she saw the genuine fear beneath his anger, recognized that her safety was the one thing that could distract him enough to make mistakes. "Promise me you'll come back," she said instead, gripping his shirt with desperate fingers. "Promise me this Lorenzo person doesn't get lucky." "He won't." Luca kissed her with bruising intensity, pouring everything he couldn't say into the contact. I love you too much to die now, when we've barely started building this life together. I'll come back, Elena. I always come back. He left her there with 4 guards, encrypted phones, and instructions to trust no one except Marcus if something went wrong. The next 36 hours were the longest of Elena's life, stretched by uncertainty and the kind of helpless worry that came with loving someone who lived violently. She tried to work, to read, to sleep, but nothing could quiet her mind's conjuring of worst-case scenarios. When Luca finally returned, he looked exhausted, and there was blood on his shirt. Not his, he assured her immediately, but he was whole and safe, and that was all that mattered. She threw herself into his arms with relief, so profound it made her knees weak, and he held her like she was the only thing keeping him upright. "It's done," he said simply. "Lorenzo is no longer a concern, and I've made it clear to everyone else that you are completely off limits. No games, no threats, no attempts to use you as leverage. Anyone who tries will face consequences that make what happened to Lorenzo seem merciful." Elena didn't ask for details, didn't need to know the specifics of how Luca had neutralized this threat. She simply held him, feeling the tension slowly drain from his body as the adrenaline faded and exhaustion took its place. They stayed in the safe house one more night, needing the privacy and security to reconnect without the pressure of their normal lives. In the morning, tangled in expensive sheets with Miami's sunrise painting everything golden, Luca traced the curve of Elena's hip with gentle fingers and said, "Marry me." Elena went very still. "What?" "Marry me," Luca repeated, propping himself up on one elbow to see her face clearly. "Not someday, not eventually when things are less complicated. Now, soon, as quickly as we can arrange it. Because the last 2 days taught me something I should have already known. Life is uncertain in my world, Elena. Threats emerge without warning, and I could die tomorrow despite all my precautions. And if I die, I want to die knowing I made you mine in every way possible. I want my name attached to yours, want the legal protections that marriage provides, want everyone to know you're not just my partner but my wife." He cupped her face, his dark eyes intense with sincerity. "I want to build something permanent with you in a world where nothing is promised. Say yes, Elena. Take the risk with me." Elena's eyes filled with tears she didn't try to hide. A year ago, even 6 months ago, she would have said the proposal was too fast, too dangerous, too much too soon. But that was before she had loved Luca, before she understood that sometimes the right choice was the reckless one, that playing it safe meant missing out on the best things life offered. "Yes," she said, watching his expression transform from tense anticipation to profound relief. "Yes, I'll marry you. I'll take every risk with you, Luca. Today, tomorrow, for however long we get." They married 3 weeks later in a small ceremony at the Coral Gables estate, surrounded by the people who mattered most: Marcus and a handful of Luca's trusted associates, Elena's mother who cried through the entire ceremony despite her ongoing concerns about her daughter's choices, and a judge who owed Luca enough favors not to ask questions about the expedited timeline. Elena wore a simple cream dress that cost more than her first car, and Luca wore a perfectly tailored suit with his grandfather's cufflinks. And when they said their vows, every word felt like both promise and prayer. The reception was intimate and beautiful. Dinner and dancing under string lights, while Miami's elite speculated from a distance about the wedding they hadn't been invited to. Elena danced with her new husband and felt something settle in her chest, not the ending of her story, but perhaps the conclusion of one chapter and the beginning of another. "No regrets?" Luca murmured against her ear as they swayed to music that filtered through the evening air. "Only that I didn't find you sooner," Elena answered honestly. "That I wasted time with men who didn't deserve me when you were waiting somewhere in my future. But you found me eventually," Luca said, spinning her gently before pulling her close again. And you've made me better, Elena. Softer in ways that don't diminish my strength. More human. Before you, I was just the machine everyone believed me to be. Efficient, calculating, dangerous. But you remind me that there's more to existence than power and control. You remind me what I'm actually fighting to protect. Months passed in a blur of contentment, cut with the occasional crisis, as Elena fully integrated into both Luca's world and the life they were building together. She learned to read the subtle signs of when he was dealing with something violent, learned to be present and supportive without asking questions that would burden him with details she didn't need. She learned which associates could be trusted and which ones were only allies of convenience, learned to navigate the complex politics of an empire built in shadows. And she discovered that being Luca Moretti's wife came with its own kind of power, the ability to speak with his authority in certain contexts, to command respect from people who had previously dismissed her, to make decisions that shaped their empire's direction. She wasn't just the woman behind the man. She was integral to the machine they operated together, her business acumen complementing his strategic violence in ways that made them formidable. But power came with costs she hadn't fully anticipated. There were nights when Luca woke from nightmares he wouldn't discuss, when the weight of the violence he committed in service of their life together showed in the haunted look behind his eyes. There were moments when Elena caught herself making morally questionable decisions, with the same casualness Luca showed, realized she had been fundamentally changed by proximity to his world. There were times she looked in the mirror and wasn't entirely sure she recognized the woman staring back. Stronger than she had been, certainly, but also harder, capable of things the girl Adrian had broken never could have imagined. And then, exactly 1 year after the gala where everything had changed, Elena discovered she was pregnant. She told Luca on the anniversary of their first kiss, presenting him with the positive test over dinner in the penthouse, where they had first made love. His reaction was everything and nothing like she had expected. Shock, certainly, but also profound joy and immediate terror as he confronted the reality of bringing a child into his dangerous world. "I can't keep them safe," he said, pacing their living room with agitated energy. "Not completely. No matter how many precautions we take, no matter how many enemies I eliminate, there will always be threats. And now they'll target our child the way they once targeted you. I've brought you into this world, Elena, and now we're bringing an innocent life into it too. How do we justify that? The same way people have always justified having children in dangerous times," Elena said calmly, placing her hand over the place where their baby grew. "We do the best we can. We love them fiercely. We teach them to be strong and smart and careful, and we trust that the life we can give them, full of love and protection and possibilities, is worth the risks." She moved to him, taking his face in her hands. "You're going to be an amazing father, Luca, and our child will know they're loved, will grow up understanding both the light and shadow of the world. That's not nothing." "I'm terrified," Luca admitted, his hands covering hers. "More frightened than I've ever been facing any threat, any enemy. Because this isn't something I can control with strategy or eliminate with violence. This is faith, Elena. Faith that we can keep them safe, that we can be good parents despite everything." "Then we take that leap together," Elena said softly. "The way we've taken every other leap in this relationship. With open eyes and joined hands, knowing we might fail, but trying anyway, because the alternative is living small and safe, and never experiencing this kind of profound joy." The pregnancy progressed smoothly, and Elena discovered that being Luca's pregnant wife came with even more protection than usual. He became nearly insufferable with his hovering attention, driving her to and from work personally, insisting on accompanying her to every doctor's appointment, treating her like she was made of glass despite her protests. But beneath the overprotectiveness was genuine vulnerability. Luca was preparing to be a father, confronting mortality and legacy in ways his violent life had previously insulated him from. The final confrontation came not from enemies within Luca's world, but from the one person Elena had thought was permanently relegated to her past. Adrian returned to Miami 8 months into her pregnancy, emboldened by time and distance, and apparently unable to let go of his obsession with reclaiming what he had lost. He showed up at one of the few public events Elena still attended, forcing his way past security to confront her in the restroom hallway. "You think you've won," Adrian said, blocking her path with his body. "You think marrying that criminal and carrying his bastard makes you better than me. But I see through it, Elena. You're still the insecure girl I dated, still desperate for validation, still—" He didn't finish the sentence. Luca appeared with the silence of a predator, his hand closing around Adrian's throat with enough pressure to cut off air and words simultaneously. The violence in his expression was absolute, the civilized mask completely abandoned. "I told you," Luca said quietly, his voice carrying more menace for its calmness. "What would happen if you ever came near her again? I gave you a chance to leave Miami and never return. You chose to ignore that mercy." He looked at Elena, who stood frozen watching this final confrontation with her past. "This is your choice, amore. Do I kill him now, make him disappear so completely that no one will ever find the body? Or do I call the police? Let Detective Morrison finally have his wish of arresting me for something, knowing I'll be out by morning but you'll have to live with the media coverage? Your call, Elena. He's yours to judge." Elena looked at Adrian, really looked at him for the first time in over a year. She saw what she had refused to see when they were together, the weakness beneath the arrogance, the cruelty that came from insecurity rather than strength, the smallness of a man who needed to diminish others to feel significant. And she felt nothing. No anger, no fear, not even satisfaction at seeing him brought low. "Let him go," she said finally. "He's not worth the trouble, Luca. Not worth your time. Not worth the risk of arrest. Certainly not worth the satisfaction he'd feel knowing he mattered enough for you to kill him." She met Adrian's terrified eyes steadily. "You were right about one thing. I was insecure when we were together. But that girl is gone, Adrian. You killed her with your casual cruelty, and I rebuilt someone stronger from the ruins. Someone who doesn't need your approval or your regret, or your existence in my life whatsoever. So go away. Disappear back into whatever miserable existence you've built in New York. And know that every day for the rest of your life, you'll remember that you had something precious and you destroyed it because you were too stupid and small to recognize value when it was standing right in front of you." Luca released Adrian with a shove that sent him stumbling. "You heard my wife," he said, his arm coming around Elena protectively. "Leave. And if I ever hear your name in connection with Elena or our child again, I will reconsider her mercy. Are we clear?" Adrian fled without another word, and Elena watched him go with the finality of someone closing a door that had been left ajar too long. When she turned back to Luca, she found him studying her with an expression of pure admiration. "That was magnificent," he said softly. "Choosing mercy when you could have chosen violence, being the better person when he gave you every justification to be cruel." "I learned from the best," Elena replied, taking his hand and placing it over her swollen belly where their daughter was doing her nightly acrobatics. "You've taught me that real power doesn't need to prove itself with violence, that sometimes the strongest choice is the compassionate one." "You've taught me that too," Luca admitted. "Every day, you remind me that there's more to life than the empire I've built. That legacy isn't just about power and control, but about the love we create and the family we protect." He kissed her forehead gently. "Our daughter is lucky to have you as her mother, and I'm lucky to have you as my wife, my partner, my conscience when I need one." 3 weeks later, Elena gave birth to their daughter in the early hours of a Miami morning, and Luca held his child for the first time with tears streaming down his face. They named her Sophia, after Luca's grandmother. and she had her father's dark eyes and her mother's stubborn chin, and an instinct for wrapping everyone around her tiny fingers that suggested she would be formidable in her own right. Life settled into a new rhythm. Sleepless nights and the chaos of new parenthood layered over the ongoing reality of Luca's empire. But watching him with their daughter, seeing the legendary Luca Moretti reduced to helpless adoration by a 7-pound infant, Elena understood that they had created something more powerful than any empire built on violence. They had created family, redemption, proof that people could change without erasing who they fundamentally were. On Sophia's first birthday, Elena stood on the penthouse balcony, watching Miami's sunset paint the sky in impossible colors, reflecting on the journey that had brought her here. 2 years since the gala, since Luca had claimed her publicly and whispered words that changed everything. 2 years since she had chosen danger over safety, passion over convenience, the man who saw her worth over the man who had taught her to doubt it. Luca joined her on the balcony. Sophia balanced on his hip, already fighting sleep despite the late hour. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, settling beside her. "Endings and beginnings," Elena said honestly. "How the worst night of my life, running into Adrian, became the catalyst for the best decision I ever made. How choosing you was the most dangerous and most rewarding risk I've ever taken." She looked at their daughter, whose dark curls caught the dying light, and felt her heart expand with love so fierce it was almost painful. How we've built something beautiful in the shadows, something that might not make sense to anyone else, but is absolutely perfect for us. "No regrets?" Luca asked, echoing his question from their wedding day. "None," Elena answered, and meant it completely. "Every choice, every risk, every moment of fear. It was all worth it to get here, to have this life with you." Below them, Miami glittered with its usual electric energy, full of people pursuing their own versions of happiness and power. Somewhere in that sprawling city, Adrian Blackwood was living his diminished life, probably still bitter about the woman who got away. Somewhere, Detective Morrison was still building his case, still hoping to find evidence that would stick. But up here, above it all, the Moretti family stood together watching the sunset. A man who had built an empire on violence but learned gentleness from love. A woman who had been broken but rebuilt herself stronger than before. And a child who represented both their past redemption and their future hope. And when the sun finally dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in final shades of pink and gold, Luca pulled Elena close and whispered against her hair. "Let him watch from wherever he is. Let the whole city watch. Let them see what we've built, what we've become. Because you're mine, Elena Moretti. You've always been mine. From the moment you kissed me back in front of everyone, we were inevitable. And I will spend every day for the rest of my life proving that choosing me was the best decision you ever made." "You already have," Elena said softly, turning to kiss him as their daughter dozed against his shoulder. "Every single day, you prove it. We prove it. That love can exist in darkness. That redemption is possible even for people who don't deserve it. That sometimes the most beautiful things grow from the most unlikely soil." And there, 3 stories above Miami's glittering streets, as night settled over the city, and their daughter slept the innocent sleep of the protected and loved, Elena and Luca held each other and understood that their story wasn't about a woman kissing a mafia boss for revenge. It was about 2 damaged people finding each other and building something unbreakable from their combined scars. It was about choosing love even when it came wrapped in danger, about standing beside someone through darkness and light, about understanding that real power wasn't domination, but the courage to be vulnerable with the right person. Adrian could watch from whatever distant city he inhabited now. The rest of Miami could speculate about the notorious Luca Moretti and his unlikely wife. But none of it mattered, because Elena had found what she had been seeking without even knowing she was searching. Not just love, but partnership. Not just security, but strength. Not just a man who wanted her, but a man who helped her become the best version of herself. And that, she thought as Luca carried their sleeping daughter inside, and then returned to pull Elena into his arms for one more kiss beneath Miami's emerging stars, was worth every risk she had taken, every moment of fear she had endured, every choice that had led her to this moment, this man, this life. She had kissed a mafia boss in front of her ex-boyfriend. He had whispered for him to watch what he had lost, and in doing so, they had both won everything that mattered. The city sparkled below them, indifferent and eternal, and above it, the Morettis stood together, proof that even in a world built on violence and shadows, love could flourish, redemption could occur, and sometimes the most dangerous choice was actually the safest one to make, because being safe meant living small, and Elena Martinez Moretti had learned, through fire and choice and the love of a dangerous man, that she was built for so much more than small. She was built for this, for empire and family, for standing beside someone who ruled the shadows while teaching her daughter to walk in light, for being both soft and strong, vulnerable and fierce, the woman who had been broken and the woman who emerged unbreakable from those fractures. And as Miami's night settled around them and Luca held her like she was the only thing keeping him tethered to humanity, Elena smiled and thought, "Let them watch. Let them all watch what I found when I stopped playing it safe and started choosing joy over security, passion over convenience, love over fear. Let them watch, and let them wonder how someone like her ended up with someone like him. Only they would ever know the truth, that she hadn't ended up with him at all. They had found each other, claimed each other, chosen each other again and again through every challenge and threat and moment of doubt. And they would keep choosing each other, every day, for however long their dangerous, beautiful life allowed. That was their story. That was their truth. That was their forever, hard-won and fiercely protected and absolutely, perfectly theirs.